Should you pull for Fairytale Tenebria? Today, we're going to help you answer that question. We're going to take a look at our kit, see where and how to use her, how to gear her, and see if she is worth it to you. F.Tene is a limited 5-star ice mage. Her S1 is 1 pair. She attacks the enemy with a 30 up to 45% chance to inflict 2 poison effects for 1 turn. Her S2 is Wild Card. When an ally is attacked by an enemy inflicted with Provoke or Redirected Provoke, it activates Shuffle, which can only proc once per turn. Shuffle attacks all enemies and inflicts a random debuff for 1 turn. A successful attack will do more damage if the enemy has Provoke or Redirected Provoke debuff on them, which scales with their max HP. Now finally, her S3 is Tea Party. This attacks all enemies, dispelling 1 buff before inflicting Unbuffable for 2 turns and Redirected Provoke for 1 turn. Now that we know her kit, let's take a look at the strengths within it. Now, 1 pair really doesn't do much. The best part of this skill is that you can soul burn it for an additional turn just so you can rotate your skills a little bit faster. The wild card passive is what is really unique about F.Tene. As mentioned, Shuffle can activate once per turn and it can be procced by any enemy as long as they have Redirected Provoke or a regular Provoke on them, which means you don't have to only rely on her own S3 as a lot of tanks have Provokes in their kit. And the extra damage from the S3 scales off of the target's max HP, so it is quite useful against tankier heroes. And now even though Shuffle has a random debuff on it, it's still super useful because the debuffs are Silence, Defense Break, and Unbuffable, with Silence and Defense Break being very valuable debuffs. The S3 Tea Party does strip before applying the debuffs, which makes it suitable for being a first turn hero. Redirected Provoke is also insanely strong because, as the name suggests, you can redirect the enemies to hit a certain target. This target could simply be a tank used to keep everybody safe, or it can be someone who's going to benefit your own team greatly simply by being hit, such as a G Purgus who's going to push your entire team, or a Crow or Dark Corvus who's going to need to take damage or be hit to unleash a very strong S3. But there are other deadlier choices like MLK, Senya, Violet, or even Mort. Now, not only does the S3 make her suitable for being a great first turn hero, her stats also tell a similar story. She has a base speed of 115 and 18% effectiveness, with her imprint concentration giving her up to an additional 27%. And remember that you can use a Fire Tenebria as an imprint on her. Now, a huge strength for her is also being a mage, and as you know, mages have some of the most unique and fun artifacts out there, which allows her to fill different roles depending on what you decide to slap on her. So now that we know her strengths, what are her weaknesses? As mentioned before, 1 pair is incredibly lackluster, especially considering that it is the only skill you can use after burning your S3, since your S2 activates automatically. And although I did say Shuffle is strong because it has good debuffs, it is still RNG at the end of the day. And I'm sure we all would rather have a consistent defense break or silence rather than hoping that the correct one lands. And Tea Party is strong because it has a strip, but it is weak because it only strips 1 buff, which means that an FCC or any other buffs on the enemy could prevent you from stripping that immunity if that is what you need. And speaking of immunity, of course, it is going to be a huge weakness of hers because she works solely off of being able to cripple the enemy by landing a ton of debuffs. Cleanses also ruin her day with notable counters like a Tywin, Elena, Dilibet, AOL, Champ Z, or pretty much any grass type hero. Or you can even throw in counter heroes that could potentially one-tap her like a Violet, MLK, or even a Charles. Now, F.Tene isn't specifically weak. She's got a great kit, but she's just been pushed out of the meta with the release of Dilibet, which completely killed the Cerise F.Tene combo. Now you have Violet, who is legitimately unkillable by F.Tene, and not only does she have direct counters to deal with, there are just better picks for first turn heroes such as Rand, Cerise, or AOL, and even better second turn heroes such as Flan or Caesarea. And now that we know her strengths and weaknesses, where can we make use of her? She generally isn't used in PvE, but I have seen people make use of her successfully in a Wyvern 13 one-shot team. And as for PvP, sadly, as I mentioned, she fell off severely after the release of Dilibet, and it's only gotten worse. But you could still make use of her in Guild Wars if you wanted to, and if you wanted to find a comp without a Violet in it. Then in RTA, you could still use her there as well, but you definitely want to keep her as a later pick in your draft because of how easily countered she is. So now we move on to the builds. The first build here is the most common build, and it's the first turn build. Of course, you can use this as a second turn build if you have someone else moving first, but it's pretty much the same concept. Obviously, she will be on a speed set, then you can run hit or immunity, that's really up to you. But you're simply going to throw all your stats into speed because that's the most important thing to her. I did put a min of 265 speed. That may be too fast for some of you guys out there, but whatever, just try to make her as fast as you can. And on the flip side, some of you may say 265 is too slow and she's going to be useless at that speed. And you may be right, but you just got to be smart and try not to speed contest to someone who's obviously going to outspeed you. Other than speed, you're going to pour everything else into effectiveness, and if you have some leftover stats, of course you're going to throw on some health and defense if possible. Now as for artifacts, I'm a huge believer in RNG, so Abyssal Crown is my #1 pick, but you can run Siri Ren as well if you want a good variety of debuffs with a better chance to proc. Now you can also run Violin, as the strip is always useful, though do note that the Violin will strip after it procs the unbuffable and the provoke from the S3. And as a mage, you can always run Tagahells. F.Tene might not be able to make use of the Tagahells, but your teammate probably can. Then last of all, you can run an Etika Scepter just to try to rotate back to your S3 a bit more quickly. Now the second build we have here is the Bamboozled build. For this build, you can really throw whatever you want on her, though I do recommend speed, counter, injury, or revenge. For the stats here, we're going to slow her down and decrease her effectiveness a bit, but we're going to try to make her way tankier. The purpose of this build is to throw off your opponent by running a tanky Tenebria instead of the usual super fast squishy one. The stats here are pretty modest in my opinion, and you could do better if you want to go with this build, but you can really build her however you want. This is just a general off meta build. You can even slap a ton of DPS stats on her, though I don't recommend it as I've tried it and it doesn't really work too well. But anyways, for the artifact on this build, it's going to be the exact same as the last build, but I think this time around you could probably make use of her own artifact, which is Fairytale for a Nightmare. And now moving on to the last page, what are my final thoughts on F.Tene? In PvE, I can't recommend her here, but the fact that she is viable in a one-shot Wyvern 13 team, I ended up giving her a decent 5.0 rating. In PvP, sadly her performance here isn't too much better. She scores a pretty low mark in Arena because she isn't really viable in Arena defense anymore, and she isn't really great in offense either. Guild Wars isn't too much better. She is usable here and there, but there are much better options. World Arena, I guess, would be her best place to shine. She is still viable, you just have to be very careful with your draft. The ROI on F.Tene isn't too bad. Because of her nature as a control hero and how her S2 passive doesn't require any molas at all, she only takes 9 molas to be able to do her job. There's no point in investing more unless you really want to do damage with her just for fun. The gear quality is ranked quite high because you do need some good gear if you want her to perform. And I do think it's worth it to invest some good gear in her because even though she is not the most useful hero out there, she is able to do her job when she needs to, and she is very fun to play with. However, the emotional investment in her is very low. She's already fallen pretty far out of the meta, and she's only going to keep falling out of the meta unless they decide to give her a huge buff. And now what we've been waiting for, the waifu rating. The design of F.Tene is one of my favorites. For those of you who remember, her design was a contest winner, so of course it had to be good. They did pull off the Alice in Wonderland look perfectly, but with the E7 waifu flair. The short skirt, the frills, the sock, it's simply amazing. And now I'm pretty much just waiting for the Sorella and the Armin skin as well. But aside from that amazing design, does she have that smile worth protecting? Yeah. Although behind that smile is a sinister motive of stepping, and probably more stepping, I'll still fight to protect that smile, dude. And now after all that stepping and begging, is she still genuine waifu material? Yeah, as always, with these types of waifus, you can't ever assume there will be a happy ending to it all, but at least you were there for the ride, and it'll be a great one. So now finally, is Fairytale Tenebria worth the pull? I want to say no, but because she is a limited hero, I have to follow that up with a yes, maybe. If you want someone who is going to help you progress in any way, shape, or form in any content, she is not going to be worth the pull. But if you want to run triple Tenebria comps, see the absolute territory, complete your Pokedex, and play with one of the most unique heroes in E7, then yes, she is worth the pull. Especially since you don't want to regret it after they buff her right after this banner ends. Now hopefully they don't buff her on the day I release this guide. If they do, I'll be a bit sad, but if that's the case, then she is probably going to be worth pulling. So if you want to see more guides, check out that playlist right over there or the video right above my face. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please like and subscribe. Thank you for hanging out with us, and I'll see you guys next time, man. Bye.